In this final video, I want to go ahead and show you one more file type within the ArcGIS Pro environment. And this file type is, was exclusively developed really for 3D data sets. And so 3D buildings are certainly one of those ones, and I'll show you how to get access to some of those here for New York City in just a minute. But there's a lot more 3D data that is coming, right? One of the reasons that Esri decided to upgrade from the old ArcMap system into a brand new ArcGIS Pro system really actually comes back around to the fact that the old system couldn't process or handle 3D data. Just too complex, and the coding couldn't support it. So it's one of the reasons we're learning all of this new software. So let's go ahead and jump in here. This is the map that we've created. I want to go ahead and show you. So we're going to go back to our map layer. And so our map document here within our project. And from here, we're actually going to go ahead and jump over. I always have to go and click a couple times. It's under View. There's a little Convert button, and I actually want to convert this map into a local scene. And what a local scene is that this is focused on a specific place rather than, say, a state level or a continental scale scene view. But the scene view itself, you'll actually see a little 3D element that jumps in here. Yeah, it's really set up for viewing 3D data sets. And so you'll see here, here's our map. It looks just like it did a second ago until you start using the Google style controls of holding the mouse wheel, which allows you to go ahead and zoom and pan, right, and move around the environment, and ultimately kind of pick on a place that you're pretty comfortable with. I want to go ahead and just kind of adjust my scale here and make sure that I'm still seeing everything that I want to see in my data set. But really, I want you to kind of get to a place like this. We have all of our data in here. And then the last part of this I want you to go ahead and do is that for New York City, we have the advantage. And again, this isn't available everywhere, but it's becoming more common. We can go into Add Data, and underneath Add Data, we can go to ArcGIS Online. I'm just going to search NYC Manhattan buildings, or take that back, 3D buildings. And let it go ahead and search this out. You're actually going to see a couple different layer types in here. I'm going to go ahead and pick that one and drop it in. And what you're going to see here is it's going to take a minute to process this, but we're going to get all of the buildings for the Manhattan Island to go ahead and populate into our map. And so now we have our 2D data. We have 3D data in on top of it. I'm going to go ahead and actually export this exact same way using the simple method to get this out to Photoshop, because I want to show you how to create some new diagrams using data viewed from an aerial perspective. You don't necessarily have to have 3D information to take advantage of the graphic look and feel of looking at your data from a perspective rather than looking at it straight down in plan view all the time, right? And so again, you want to make sure that you get to a comfortable place, that you are at a scale that you are comfortable with, and you don't want to adjust anything. You're going to go up here to share. You're going to go export map. You're going to tell it you'll want a JPEG. You're going to go ahead and export this. Turn everything off except for one layer at a time. You're going to export, I think there's 7 layers here. Export those out. I'll see you over in Photoshop. Now that we've arrived in Photoshop, what I went ahead and it was the same process. I went and opened up each one of these JPEGs individually, dropped them all together into one file. So you see all of my layers stacked on top of one another here. And so all of this information, coming together, beginning with my hillshade, right? And so we have some 3D information about Central Park here. You can actually see it kind of popping out. I think it looks pretty cool. There's some things that I like to do just early on to help me get context and understand kind of what's going on in this. We used this trick in a previous video of going in, making sure you don't have contiguous clicks, so it'll grab all the blue pixels across the entire landscape here. I'm just going to hit Control C, new layer, Control V, drop those in, turn off the original, and you can see now that where I've got water, it actually kind of helps clean it up. Certainly there's some missing pieces, and so if you wanted to, or from an accuracy standpoint, if you needed to, you can actually come back in and go ahead and clean up some of that extra area that was hidden by labels or whatever, but it's a pretty good trick for just immediately getting that to drop in. We can also go ahead and take a look at just turning on the information for just the boundary for Central Park. And so again, I just want it to appear green. It's already the symbol that's here. All I need to do is actually go ahead and select on the white part, click that away, and then the last thing, similar to what we've done before, I'm going to go ahead and use the I'm kind of torn between color burn, which I think is really nice there. and linear burn, which gives me a darker green color. I think I'm going to leave it darker green. But again, what it does is it actually goes ahead and showcases the hillshade that's underneath all of that information there. And so I like the way that that looks. We're going to work with our building data here for a minute, and you definitely see some of the challenges start to pop up with bringing this in. One is all of that hillshade information just disappeared, and the reason it disappeared is pretty simple. It's because all of this white space, you know, spread out through all of this, is definitely trying to attract the same attention. And you know, we can zoom in a little bit tighter and see that there's a lot of pixelization when we're looking at all of the buildings of Manhattan, and so it's not the cleanest layer to go through and pick out. And so one of the things that I tend to do is I tend to really pull that tolerance back and say that you know, like, let's try like a 3. Hopefully what that's going to do is only get the pure white areas across this map, which is what it did. I'll go ahead and drop it in that way. The other thing that's here, and this is potentially, you know, is that everything else now kind of has a gray look underneath it. We can live with that, or we can actually come in, and one way to deal with that is to actually go ahead and add a new layer. And I'm just going to go ahead and add a white layer in the background here, and then I'm going to go ahead and actually change up the opacity of my hillshade layer. I'm going to bring it about 70, and maybe a little bit. 50 was looking pretty good, actually. And you actually see it. It does a pretty decent job of kind of cleaning up a lot of this. The other thing that we definitely see is that the buildings are now being hidden underneath our park layer. So I'm going to actually go ahead and move the buildings up to the top. And you can see that they've now slipped out. The roads are basically coming in white, which is generally, you know, what I'm looking for here. But there's still a lot of visual clutter in this drawing. And so one of the things that I think I'm going to go ahead and do is that, if you remember, go ahead and turn off these other layers real quick. Remember, we're really only interested in this area outside. Sorry, grabbed the wrong layer. Right, we're only interested in this area outside. I'm gonna turn my tolerance back up because I don't need it that low. Turn contiguous back on. Go ahead and grab all the white area outside of this. That's really the area that we're most interested in for this study, because I'm going to turn the tree layer back on, and we don't have data outside of this. And so all I'm going to do with this is I'm actually going to hit Control-C, create a new layer, drop it in there, and I'm going to turn that off. You can see that I just created a nice ice hockey rink around the buffer within it. And if I went back in and turned all those layers back on, you know, you get something that looks a little bit like this. What I'm really aiming for there is that I want to kind of go ahead and zoom, you know, focus my map and my viewers in on just this buffered area in and around New York. And the reason for that is I'm going to turn back on my tree layer here in a minute, and that's the piece that I'm going to really talk about, you know, and focus on with the data that I'm bringing into this. And so certainly this is kind of getting close to what we want, but I'm going to add one more feature, which says I'm going to go ahead and feather it. 30 looks good to me. And then I'm going to hit delete a couple times, go ahead and kind of clear that out just a little bit, give it nice urban fog effect, and then ta-da, I've got a 3D scene that shows Central Park with its water bodies, the street trees that surround Central Park within that 1 block buffer zone. Everything else is set up like this, and I'm pretty comfortable with the fact that I've used at least 5 layers. I've gone in and dropped some kind of editing or effect onto each one of those layers, and away we go. Play around with it, see what works for you. Certainly, you know, we could come in and start to, you know, dress this up and add some additional layer effects to some of these if we wanted to look at that. You just have to kind of be careful with it. The one layer effect that I could think about doing here is that I could probably look at, with the water bodies, coming in and doing some kind of bevel. The challenge with bevels and contours or textures is that, you know, you've really got to be careful with kind of how it looks in terms of how much effect, right? You can even see as I'm starting to pull that in, because we are at an angle already, because we've chosen an angle, we've got to be really careful with the angle at which we set up any kind of bevel in here. And as I'm looking at this, these look okay. This looks like the water's trying to come up to the surface on me. I don't know. I mean, I'm not loving it. And so maybe if I try a different, well, that's not terrible right there. Let's try that, and then maybe come in and change out. I might have to go in and do some deleting underneath it. Yeah, something like that. It's not terrible, right? again, I can play around with all kinds of stuff. You guys know Photoshop, you know what to do. What I want you to do is make sure to go ahead and finish this out. Put a legend on it of some kind. Make sure that you've modified all of your layers in some meaningful way here in Photoshop. Put a title on it. I'm missing a few things. North arrow, scale bar, all of those things are in the assignment sheet. Make sure you clean it up. This is all you need to turn in is a final version of this. It'll show me that you've worked your way through the rest of the exercise.